Hey, hello everybody. Hello from South Dakota. Happy coffee day and happy death of happy death of Roe versus Wade. Um, and I do understand that it just they default back now to the states, but gives me a little bit of hope in the human ability to reason and conclude. But I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a shout out. It does become apparent just from observing human societies and especially our Americanism that there's a large swath of people that believe right and wrong or sin as it's known is just an arbitrary set of rules, and these people believe that their version of good and bad or right and wrong is just as good as anyone else's version of right and wrong. This is the pitfall of the form of government known as democracy. It really is inability. It has an inability to distinguish, where that line is, and this kind of a mentality is becoming more and more pervasive in the American church system, and has been for a while. But the Bible teaches the contrary of that. It teaches that good and bad, right and wrong, are not arbitrary at all. But these are defined and held as coming from God Himself. You notice I said they're defined and held as coming and originating from God. So they're not arbitrary. You don't just get to define them any way that you want. This dilemma deepens for both ends of the political spectrum because, on the one hand, the citizen is faced with this like moral dilemma of believing that the government should enforce upon the rest of the citizens their version of good and bad. And Solzhenitsyn wrote about this natural tendency and the moral dilemma that it implies. I'll give you this quote here. Solzhenitsyn wrote, "It is in our human nature, so it has a natural instinct, to apply ordinary individual human values and standards to larger social phenomenon and associations of people, up to and including the nation and the state as a whole. Whatever feelings predominate in the members of a given society at any given moment in time, they will suffer, they will serve to color the whole of that society and determine its moral character. And if there is nothing good there to pervade that society, it will destroy itself or be brutalized by the triumph of evil instincts." Now, I'll give you some examples. A progressive might say there is an inherent sense of injustice in that a woman should have the right over her own body. And a conservative would argue the contrary and would say that, such a theory has limits, and that when the woman, in alignment with her husband or otherwise, begins to believe that it's her right to kill an unborn child, even in instances where the birth of the child really brings no threat to her life, the excuse that's often used to justify, it seems to rightly bring about a sense of revulsion, as to how a woman can so cavalierly disregard the sacredness of life inside of her. My suspicion, my suspicions have long been that such a decision causes a much deeper wound in the female than she ever suspected. And the repercussions are only realized after the fact. And in such cases, the woman who does make this kind of a commitment is left with her own sense of regret and what could have been in that life so extinguished. What he or she might have become, this unborn child, what they might have become, and they, might nostalgically contemplate that in their life as it progresses forward. But invariably, many people become seemingly self justified and they brush away these thoughts as if they were just random feelings, um, that they might, be the manifestations of a morally conflicted conscience. If the right and wrong is only arbitrary and there's no ultimate spiritual decider, then where do such feelings originate? Why the moral conflict? Might you perhaps feel a natural tendency when not taking ownership of such a wrong, feel compelled, like Cain, to murder that neighbor who disagrees with you, to set at ease the continued oppressive forces that raging inside of you? Um, so we see that the Bible has, for millennium, um, tried to deal with these kinds of issues and expose them. There's nothing arbitrary about that morally conflicted state, nor is there anything arbitrary about your hate of people who disagree with you. It's perfectly predictable, and God has predicted, and it has been predicted by the great physician Jesus in the book. The same goes for the homosexual and the adulterer and so on and so forth, who think him or herself justified in his or her lifestyle, trying to galvanize support in that cathartic calming of the emotionally conflicted state by affirming openly, I'm coming out, that the opposition has the right to their opinion, and therefore, equally believing that the right and wrong of the chosen life, the life they've chosen to engage in, are merely two different opinions and each is equally entitled to them. I often flinch in silent amazement how it is that people in our current, political theater believe that such a conundrum is new. That's what becomes fascinating, believing themselves, to be set free in a sense, or that they will be set free as this new moral order kind of encroaches and becomes more and more ensconced, which is really an immoral order. And as this arises out of the earth, they think this is some new nuance and recent development, and that we must shrug off those oppressive, antiquated moral postulates of yesteryear. And that if we can only do so, society would be liberated from those oppressive morals. Such philosophies have been tried in at least 3 spheres of operation in the last century, with the net result of the murder of hundreds of millions of people. As a result, what I find so astonishing and amazing about this is not that you're interesting, because you're not. You're nor fascinating, nor impressive. It's not even that I find even the remotest peculiarity about you per se, or even that I sit in a deep state, you know, of relishing in self-righteous judgment over the kind of sickness that pervades the society that Solzhenitsyn and with certainty the scriptures aptly describe. It's really none of the above. But what I do sit and contemplate with no little fascination is the accuracy, the precision by which the God of the Bible predicted thousands of years ago, which concerns a society that eats that forbidden fruit, and the direct relationship that fruit of not being able to distinguish between the good and the bad has with the absolute and acute naivety. Yes, the naivety that Adam and Eve must have left that garden with. Specifically, a naivety about how to distinguish between good and evil, apart from God. Ergo, my version of good and evil is better than your version of good and evil, and most of you think you know better than God, who just finished warning you in the last 3 murder machines, 3 of the largest in human history. The same sickness that pervades Americanism has just recently caused the murder of hundreds of millions of Americans around the globe, in arguably the most remarkable and systematic murder machines in human history. And there you sit, like an insipid, whiny, snot-nosed brat acting like you found some new toy that just recently appeared on the political horizon, thinking that your version of good and bad is just as good as anybody else's. God does not call humans fools for no reason. So I just figured I'd let you know you're pretty fascinating. Yes, I am fascinated, but not with you.